Welcome to While She Builds, the podcast for professionals in their 20s and 30s who want to think like founders and challenge the road to a traditional corporate ladder. Whether you are building your own business, growing your career, or doing a bit of both, this is about seeing yourself on the front seat of your own career and using your corporate experience as a launch pad for bigger things. Every episode, we sit down with real founders who have either made the shift or are embracing this journey that we call life. My mission is simple, that you leave this episode with at least one action that you can take through the frameworks, insights, and tools being discussed in the episodes forward. So today on this episode, we have somebody special. His name is Krish.
Hi, Himani. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
Thank you as well. Krish is the founder and CEO of Roam, which simplifies international student migration by bringing all the resources that a student needs together into one platform. But it's not only that. He's previously founded 15, a health startup in India that worked with state governments to gamify outdoor public gyms. He's been featured in Forbes, Sports, and Quants. He's also worked in VC startups, been a research fellow at NYU. I think the list just goes on. So Krish, this is just what I have as a bio on paper, but tell me a little bit about yourself. What's yours?
Happy to. Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Mumbai, India. Always loved the big city life. And growing up, I enjoyed building things. I didn't know that it could be turned into a career path, so I always thought I was fooling around. Dabbled in almost everything one can do. I sold shoes like every teenager did back in the day, and started a bunch of Instagram pages about food, about lifestyle, about fitness. That turned into a passion to do more. And that's how Fit-Teen came to be. It became a health tech startup where we digitize existing outdoor infrastructure to gamify fitness for the youth. Following that, I got into NYU, moved to New York, which most people find overwhelming. For me, it was actually kind of homely, given that Mumbai and New York are very similar. New York's actually a bit more calm, so made me feel comfortable there. And I fell into this program called Business Tech and Entrepreneurship at NYU Stern, where we learned a lot about people, how to talk to people, tell good stories, and truly understand human behavior to drive business decisions. And that led to Rome, because I noticed myself and millions of other students struggle for weeks. Them and their families struggle for weeks as they get set up abroad when they move there to study. So everything's scattered, disaggregated. We decided to put it in one place, simplify the process, saving them loads of time, tons of stress, and thousands of dollars and pounds along the way. So that's where we are today. That's how we got here. And that's my short story.
Thank you for that. And all of this sounds exciting, right? And you already feel jump so many stages to where you're in the present, but we'll get there. We'll get there. I think what I want to start with is giving the audience a little bit of a teaser of how we met. So we met, if you remember, in Feb 2024, was it? And
Yes, that's
I
correct.
remember I was going through my stages of travels between Poland for work, and then I remember coming back from Poland into London, and I found out for some personal family reasons I had to take a flight to Mumbai. So here I am taking my bus back to Southampton in the UK, back where I used to stay. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to book the next flight. But wait, London is closed. So I need to go back in the next morning. Took a flight to Mumbai and then was there for 2 days. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so done with my travels. And here I have to take a 9.5 hour flight back from Mumbai to London. And I'm just sitting, switching my brain off. And then you come by and you sit and you asked me, I recall that, can I have a seat here? And the next thing we know that we have chatted away for the 7 hours that was remaining for that flight. What do you remember from those conversations?
That was a life story unraveled on one plane. So, well, a lot. I was sitting next to some very not the most interesting people. And I said, oh, I see 2 seats free over there. Let me go stretch out a bit. Then I saw you. I was like, hey, maybe we can make a new friend. So I sat down, turned, and I asked you, I remember this, are you a student? And you said, no, I'm actually not. And then you started. And I was like, oh, okay. Very, very interesting. This turned out to be like reading a storybook, watching a movie all in one. And we had some great conversations. You left me with The Diary of a CEO, which came into play very, very soon after that, because about a month and a half, 2 months after that flight is when Rome began. So everything I learned from that book kind of applied to what we do today. So thank you for that. I think that one bold move of me changing my seat and sitting next to an absolute stranger cascaded into learning all this stuff that then helped me get to where we are. So, well, fun plane ride.
Right? And I think things happen for a reason. When I look back at that 7 hour flight, it's not only that we got a friend from each other, but that we continue to stay in touch, that we continue to meet again in airports, that we continue to find a way to share something that will benefit us. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is probably a nice way to transition into the next question that I have for you. Why do you think the student mobility is broken today?
Sure. That is a fantastic question to lay the context for everything that's to come. So, every year, there are about 7 million students that cross borders to study abroad. But most people think getting accepted into college is the hardest thing to do. That is factually incorrect. Many people manage that part. Where the difficulty actually arises is when they move abroad without any guidance. Everything they need to do is scattered across systems, providers, and currencies, making it extremely time consuming, painstaking, overwhelming, expensive, stressful, all the negative synonyms you can think of. Because you got to open a bank account, get a SIM card, get health insurance, figure out how to file taxes, figure out your visa stuff, get a house, figure out where to buy food. If you've never cooked yourself, you got to learn how to do that. The process of settling in a new country is extremely daunting because everything's disaggregated and there's lack of education, awareness, and structure as to how to go about that process. So that is what we did at Rome, is we've simplified that entire settlement journey for anyone looking to study abroad, specifically students, because they are the most underserved niche, where stress and anxiety are at an all-time high, not just from them but from their families as well, because oftentimes most of these students have never traveled abroad, learn English as a second language, are first generation college students, and a good amount of them have put a lot at stake to risk going abroad to study to make a better life for themselves. So we serve as that bridge and that senior support system to hold their hand as they cross the border until they're well settled. And we bring down that months of uncertainty and anxiety down to a few minutes of structured support during which they can get set up with everything they need.
That's very interesting because I have a statistic right in front of me from OECD in 2025, which stated that international students in developed countries itself rose from 3.0 million in 2014 to more than 4.6 million in 2022. So that's a 16% increase despite the adversities that we saw at the time when flights were disrupted in COVID. And given the current dynamics and politics of immigration laws tightening, I assume that number will still be on the rise, just with the displacement or rise in students across other countries, which will open doors for them. Examples, Australia and Germany for Indians itself. Right?
Absolutely. On that same line, I'll drop a few statistics as well. 7 million today is projected to hit between 9 and 10 million by 2030. Students, internationally mobile students, spend a cumulative $300 billion a year conservatively today. By 2030 or 2034, in that range, that's estimated to be about 490 to $500 billion being spent every year. So, as a business, Rome is not just simplifying everything, but we're also moving towards capturing value of that $500 billion spent and taking part of it to systemize the process.
That's good to hear because that's a good transition into the next question that I have for you. So, you mentioned the problem statement clearly, right? You're doing something that a student would have faced as a problem when they would have moved internationally, starting out for the first time. So, let's talk about the value that your startup today brings, because essentially our podcast still goes down to how you transitioned from either working full time into your entrepreneurial journey, or you in the transition and you building something out of it. So if you were a student today, or if I was a student today, what would I get from you landing as my day zero in a country like UK, for example?
Absolutely. Every single thing post admission falls into our purview. What that means is if you have a tuition deposit that needs to be paid, we show you how to pay it. If you need to select off campus housing, we show you how to go about it. If you need to get your documents in order to file for your UK visa, we assist with that. That is all the tangible first touch points that we have with students. Second of which, we help you immerse culturally and in a manner of speaking into the lifestyle of what it's like to be settled in the UK. So culture about tipping, which luckily the UK doesn't have a very big tipping culture, so kudos to that. But take everything about the weather, about the tube system, the subways, how do you move around, what the Eurorail looks like, what a train line ticket is, how do you get a student discount, end-to-end immersion of what would take you months to figure out and discover as you navigate life as a student, and then to the more tangible essentials like bank accounts, SIM cards, how to go about getting the NHS insurance when you pay for the visa and what that entails, what your rights are as an immigrant student, all the way down to, like I mentioned, finding an accommodation and a roommate. What do you need to do if you need help once you're there? How do you book a flight ticket? What do layovers look like? What do you speak to the officer when you land at the border? How do you go about end to end immersion into life abroad as a student in the UK? That is where we come to play, not just in terms of guidance, but in terms of structured support to actually get you set up with every piece of the process so that when you touch down, you don't have to figure anything out. It's already all done. You can start living as you would from day zero. In fact, you even know what Tesco is and where to buy groceries from and how to get discounts on stuff like that. So it makes it extremely, extremely holistic and easy for you to get started.
That's really interesting, Krish, because you took me back to a journey of somebody I know personally who went through something similar, right? So, just for context, and of course, no names shared, but that person moved from India uh, to a country in the Scandinavian for the first time. Number one, to get his undergraduate degree, chose a Scandinavian country because he wanted to do something different, or go somewhere different that not necessarily the regular batch of his was going. And whilst he was proud of the decision that he took, of course, the con of Scandinavian countries from places like where we grew up in is that there's less hours in a day in the winter. So summer is all beautiful, there's roses, there's sunshine, and then comes winter where it's gloomy, it's dark, our energy levels can't keep up. We personally are not used to this lifestyle, especially if we don't find our own. We of course get lost. So it makes me think about if uh my peer had somebody like your startup who could probably guide and advise even prior to day zero, probably day minus 200, as to what someone should consider as part of before they even go internationally. Or even me, when I moved to the UK, I was not moving as a student from Dubai. I was moving with my company. But what was harder for me when setting up versus a student was, of course, establishing a social network, which otherwise you would get when you join a university or a peer group where you then meet people of your age. So I just wonder what kind of support that would have provided me, which would have been invaluable, or for my peer, which would have been invaluable for making the right choice. Because ultimately, within 1 year, he made the wise and smart decision to move back, knowing that his quality of life would continue to be higher than continuing to challenge the norm. And the way I see his story is I don't see it as a failure at all. And neither does he. He sees this as a learning because he came back stronger. He, in fact, went and continued to pursue his master's in another country and pulled all the way through.
Yep, I completely resonate with that.
I want to also talk a little bit about you and what you bring onto the table. So now that you've established Rome isn't just another project anymore, you're actually leading a team that's more older and experienced. And before I even go a little bit about back into you again, I want to state another statistic is according to the GEM report, which is the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report for 2023 and 24, younger founders are no longer rare. We see approximately 20%, that is 2 in 10, aspiring to be a founder, and more of 2 in 10 looking to be a founder or starting their own entrepreneurial journey in the coming year or years, right? But at the same time, we know that we have 5 generations in this workforce, whilst Gen Z is the one entering at this moment of time. But most of the operating experience, most of the knowledge across how capital is raised, how capital flows, the institutional knowledge that we have that still sits amongst the older generations that are still here. So you or someone else, I reckon, would be in a position where they find themselves not only necessarily leading a team of their generation anymore, but older, who have been there for longer in the game. So my question to you is, what does that dynamic look like for you? And how do you go about managing that?
It all comes down to people. One thing I think founders should learn and become exceptionally good at is understanding human behavior, psyche, and people. Every person older than you wonders what it's like to be a child again. So, pulling all those years of experience they have into a childlike scenario where there's a level of seriousness that's equally matched by a level of outrageousness and play is what sparks joy in those who have all the experience you need to capitalize on in order to do what needs to be done at a scale that has to be seismic, to say the least, and truly make impact, where you can leverage their decades of experience, give them something to look forward to, a switch up, something that they wished they had done at 20, but now they can do it at 40, and give them that autonomy and freedom to say, hey, let's make your work fun again. So that's how the dynamic works with older people, where you say it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of switching. But again, comes down to how effectively you're able to understand those that like this and then those that are set in their structure and don't want to change. So that's how we've been able to manage it. Touchwood, we've been able to find an exceptionally driven team that is experimental, has 100 years of experience cumulatively, and not just has the context, but also the play required to really do interesting things that have never been done before and help students in a manner that is so impactful, it makes Rome a household name going forward. So that's been my personal experience with building a team that is older than I am.
And I like how you said at the start of this question, it's all about knowing the people that you work with, and it's all about people. Because my experience is also, it's not only charisma going all the way through in the end, and motivation only lasts so long. Like you said, in your own way, you need to find the driver within each person and tap into that driver to make them come together as a team. So that there's that individual driver of each person that you have. And I think it like a plant, right? That is ingrained into the soil. But that soil is the base of the set of values or what brings everybody together. And it's that soil and those individual plants that are getting those nutrients that makes it grow. And that's the analogy that I think of when you mention it like that. My next question was going to be more around the ideas that your different teams bring. So you have, I understand you have a team of 20 plus strong today, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
We're close to about 12.
Almost there. So between the 10 to 20 ballpark. And with 12 coming from multiple generations, I assume that there's a lot of ideas coming through, especially with the team that's so energized at the first stages of a startup or in the coming to the mature stages of a startup. So, and given the dynamics of the shifting immigration policies, private capital shifting around, global mobility, how do you balance these different ideas, what to take on as sustainable versus what is an idea that is just hot? How do you filter that through? And the reason I ask this question, before you share your perspective and the way you do it, is we're thinking about what is the value that a listener can get from this. And we're thinking about how a listener can go about making their own journey through. And right now, a lot of entrepreneurial journeys can just get closed off in a second because probably the idea wasn't sustainable enough or was not validated in a proper manner as part of the funnel. So it makes me wonder as to when you created a problem statement, it was something that you bringing aggregated problem statements together, that is your value. But then how do you decide then of what values in addition to that gets to go ahead and not, so that you continue to live?
Absolutely. One simple mental concept: signal versus noise. Everyone who's built something that has stood the test of time understood this. Steve Jobs would speak about it a lot, but 99% of the stuff in this world is noise. For you to be able to cut through and say, okay, signal, and identify what that thread is that ties everything together. If you look at the wavelength, right, you've seen the waveform every time you
Yes.
record a voice note or something, that throughput, that line, that single line that holds all the waves, that is what I would call signal. Everything else is noise around it, but it's moving in that direction. Point being, anything that is confusing, anything that is not easy to understand, that is not clearly defined, that doesn't, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2, simply put, can be derived to mean signal, but is not on the face of its signal. It's noise. When you see something where 1 plus 1 equals 2, that's it. Follow that. That is all you need. Cut everything else out and keep taking that step closer to whatever makes sense, whatever is clearly in front of you. That's step one, is to identify and separate signal from noise. Make it clear, make it simple, make it actionable. If it's not those three things, you either haven't understood it, you think you're building something that someone wants, but no one wants it. And third, if you can't act on it, you're not going anywhere. So that's the first half. Second half, how do we manage ideas across the team? When you're building something, you need to be very clear about accountability and responsibility. Give people room to experiment and test. Make them accountable for their ideas so they feel like they need to prove to you that this could work. Or prove to the team, rather. There's no one person taking the shot. So prove to the team that, hey, okay, this has a use case. Let's look into it. But that's also underlined by signal versus noise. Okay, if this is a signal and it's an idea that could work, okay, here you're accountable for this, test it. You can recruit people to be responsible with you, but anything hits the fan, you are the one who's singularly going to answer for it. So shifting the balance and saying, okay, we'll do this together, while teamwork is definitely required to get anything off the ground, you need one person who takes that accountability to tie everyone together. Usually that is the person who has the idea. So let's say someone has an idea to try something out and they say, okay, this person can help me because they have very good insight in this space. And this person can help me because they're great at marketing, for example. The way it would flow is, okay, test it out. You're accountable. They're responsible along with you. You can bank on them. But tomorrow, when you come and show the whole team what you have, you are the point of contact that explains why you did what you did, what the signal behind it was, and why it worked or why it didn't work. I think just having those two clear mental concepts in mind makes everything a whole lot easier because you brought everything down to first principles, separated responsibility from accountability, and put it all very clearly laid out for anyone to use that as an actionable framework to execute.
I like how you are underpinning something about a sustainable business in terms of you are the brains behind the idea, but you're not the one carrying it through. So you need to document those best practices and frameworks along the way so that it can be repurposed by your team who can then become the way forward. I really like the way you said that. And that's something that I think, based on a little reading I've done across different startups, they don't necessarily do enough. They react. And in that reaction, it's forgotten to just pause, put it as a framework, put a structure around it, and mind you, that will move and work with you in the future. I want to transition now a little bit into your journey before you even started Rome. So I have it here with me. And correct me if I'm wrong, that when you were a university fellow, you have reviewed approximately over 280 startups or more. And then
Mhm.
I also know in India that you were gamifying public gyms. And I know this because you were having a conversation in the flight with me about it, and we shared our shared interest in fitness. But also you mentioned about the work that you had done before in India. So pinning on that, you've been quietly stacking those experiences laying up. What patterns did all those experiences help you see that you couldn't have seen if you were finding wrong?
I would say pattern recognition is a general meta skill that comes with experience. Meta skill being something that can be applied anywhere and everywhere. Second to that is storytelling. Your ability to communicate, charm, encapsulate the people you're talking to is a very, very, very high indicator of your future success. Being able to articulate a vision and put it into words that can then be broken down into actions, that can then be broken down into steps that people can follow to make it come true. I would say that is the biggest learning I had from everything I did before. And then there are more surface level things like knowing what investors look out for, right? You need a team, you need traction, you need tech, you need to make sure that the threats are outside the moat that you've built for yourself. So superficial stuff, mainly pattern recognition. You understand you understand certain things that draw out a positive reaction from people or from anyone you need to work with. That's on the surface of it. Under that is definitely what I just mentioned prior to that. So being able to communicate was perhaps the biggest skill I learned from across every experience I had. And really taking time to do nothing. Amidst all of this, I have spent a good amount of time doing nothing. When I say do nothing, I mean literally just shut up and think. Just let your mind run wild because the amount of replays that take place and the amount of links and networks that form between seemingly unrelated things in your head when you're not busy allow you to work tremendously towards what you're trying to get to with utmost focus and newfound clarity if you're not always clouded. So I think everyone has said this at some point, Naval being the pioneer. Work in bursts, sprint like a lion, hunt, and then give yourself time to rest. Now, the first time I heard this, I was completely against it because I know what it takes to put something together from nothing, and there's very little rest involved. But I completely see what he meant by that is you need to give yourself time to assimilate everything you're doing so that your mind has time to subconsciously process and create these links for you so that your actions are more guided than you being flustered perpetually trying to figure stuff out. And pattern recognition, people, and boredom are perhaps the three learnings that I took from everything that led to Rome. And that allows me, even today, I spend a good amount of the day not working actively, more so putting together stuff in my head that I can then put down on paper, make it into actionable steps, and execute on it. So that is the framework or the three things that I would say I took away from everything before Rome.
Pattern recognition, people, and the third one, boredom. Oh yes, in my head I would put it as wandering, but I wanted to use a specific word that you were
Wandering.
using.
I like that.
I
I like that.
I echo that in full. And I remember having a conversation with someone very senior up in the corporate ladder. And I remember he told me, Himani, just stop. Stop doing too many things. Stop. You love having different experiences, but for a second, for a minute, for an hour, just stop and do nothing. And I'm like, wow, this man must be having God knows how many meetings, has 1,000+ people under his organizational hierarchy. And he's telling me stop and do nothing. And then he explained a little bit as to what he embeds as part of his process in the day to day. He's like, I let myself wander with my thoughts early into the afternoon, late into the afternoon, and early in the morning because he starts and clocks in at 7 a.m. Gets ready and gets up before even the rest of the office is awake, has already his main bits out of the way, but because his mind is in a state of wandering in the late afternoon and early in the morning, he's just jolted, woken up, and he's writing notes about the things that his mind has done in terms of pattern recognition. And he's already on to writing them down, sending them across. And that's one of the most important learnings that I got from that conversation, with the emphasis that he put on that, because it just made me think, if someone so senior up in the hierarchy, leading a 1,000+ team all around the world, does that, that probably has weight, and a lot of weight. And
I'm glad to hear that.
So let that be for the both of us and for everybody listening here, be a reminder. Boredom is what leads to the greatest of ideas. And it's not necessarily new ideas, it's ideas of a problem that you're facing, how to go about a specific problem. It's subconsciously in your head. Something that I like to do personally, and I assume you do too, is when you have a problem right at the center or a question that you don't have the answer to, put that in your mind before you go to bed, or just subconsciously plan that in, and just that one thing, not necessarily multiple things, and let the answer come to you.
I'd say that is off late. The way I've solved most of our problems is by going to sleep. Going to sleep with a thought and waking up with the answer. And then when they said, Mozart wrote the symphonies in his sleep and Leonardo da Vinci had these ideas in his sleep and the Wright brothers figured out how to build a plane in their sleep, all these crazy things, it started to make sense. It was like your subconscious mind filters 40 to 50 million bits of information per second. We only see a handful. So, really going to sleep and saying, okay, mind, do your thing. Here's what I'm thinking about. Figure it out. You have more context than I'm aware of. And just having that certainty that the mind has the power to make everything connect somehow, it comes true. Like you just need to be able to trust in yourself, knowing that you've done the work knowing that if you're in a dilemma today, you will figure a way out and allow your mind to do that. I've been reading a lot about neuroscience and the way the mind works and certain things that are very important, certain parts of the brain. You have the default mode network. This is your identity shaper. This holds your conscious self to what the subconscious believes you to be. So I think I'm phenomenally good in my subconscious and I wake up at 5 a.m. and I work out, I'm going to be ridiculously successful. That's how my conscious mind will be primed to act every time I'm thinking or coming up against a problem. You're in that state of mind saying, okay, I can figure this out because I'm this person. Second to that, you have the reticular activating system. This is sort of the searchlight in your brain. This finds the opportunities and captures them. This is what most people consider luck. It's not luck, opportunities are around you. Your brain just needs to know what to filter for. So, your reticular activating system is guided by your default mode network. What you see yourself to be is what will influence the opportunities that your mind finds around you. So, getting that in order, getting this in order. But the number one thing that aligns both of these is some sort of chemical called norepinephrine, which
Yes.
too much of puts you into a state of fear and anxiety. Too little of puts you into a state of survival. I need to figure stuff out. When it's too much or too little, your default mode network goes into this state of overdrive saying, okay, I need to survive. Everything else can come later. And that's where the primal instinct comes out. And that's when your creativity, your calmness, your composure, everything gets shot. The second your default mode network goes awry, your reticular activating system, which actually finds opportunities that can get you in and out of things, is fried. It's not looking for ways to grow, it's looking for ways to survive, which narrows your
Yes.
scope into tunnel vision and you can't do anything. So, step one is to get everything in order. And simple ways to do that are do little bits of hard things every day that keep you in shape when shit falls apart because you still wake up at 5 a.m., you still take a cold shower, you still meditate and read a book. So, a lot of the things that ground you are things you do as part of your habit. So, it's not difficult to you while it may seem difficult to the outside world. You're constantly realigning your default mode network to say, no, I am this person. I can figure it out. There's no need to panic. We will do it. And as long as you have that mental model set to align with that version of you that you want to be, you attract what you are, not what you want to be. So as long as you're being who you desire, everything else falls into place. So I think neuroscience explains a lot of what people call luck, and everything has an explanation to it that can be engineered and controlled. That's the most fascinating thing. So that's how I've been able to keep my head on straight when stuff hits the roof, but it definitely cascades to every area of what we do. So, very interesting topic.
Very well said, Krish. And I like to know and I like to think that I have a little bit of an insight into your mind and the way it works after this now. But getting to a concluding part of our session today, and and I want to always come back to the basic and why we're here. We're here because we want to share something of value to the person listening here. It's not about us. It's not about you. It's about what we can give to someone who's listening to this and what is something that they can do actionably today. Because what we urge is take at least either one tool, one tip, one framework, or one behavior and act on it after this episode. So I'm going to tap into a reflective state of yours. And let's take the analogy of if we were back or if you were back on that Mumbai to London flight again. Now, or if someone else in your shoes was on that flight. Imagine that they were on that flight and they had either their phone with a notes app or they had a notepad or whatever with a pen and paper full of ideas. What should they actually do in the next 90 days to build their first startup?
Speaking from an entrepreneurial standpoint, The reason most startups fail is because they misconstrued a problem. When you're building something, your number one goal is to validate that this holds merit. And the way to do that is to speak to the people you're building it for. Like you said, this isn't for you, for me, it's for them. So podcasts are a way of delivering value that's been validated. So we focus our efforts on making sure what we communicate is valuable to those who listen. Exact same thing with building. You need to be able to dissect that idea, go and talk to the end user. If you're building a Whoop or a fitness device, go and talk to that ideal customer who you believe wants what you're building and understand why they want it. And as the lower you go, the more ridiculous the answers might get and the questions might get. But you got to come to that point where they've unraveled so much about themselves by answering your questions, where you finally hit the rock bottom and you say, okay, reason we're going to target this customer is because they have this underlying motive to want to do this because of this reason. That's why this will work. And that can only that can only be discovered by deciphering level by level what it is that actually drives, one, the problem, and two, the motive to find a solution. So if you have a list of ideas, start talking to people who face those problems that you say you're solving, and go down to ground zero, even sub-zero if possible, to figure out why they feel that way and what it is they're doing to overcome it currently and why your solution will help them live better.
Do you have any other thoughts to share with someone who's listening to this?
I would say find what you're interested in and start talking about it. A simple LinkedIn post or Twitter, we did a little bit of this for a while, but a simple, consistent, visible front to the world will open more doors than you can imagine. Consistency plus visibility equals opportunity. Learned that from a friend of mine on Sunday. But live by that, and soon enough, you'll be with another friend of yours who you met on a flight, talking on a podcast that a few thousand people might watch today and a few million might watch day after. So you don't know where your efforts are going to lead you. All you can do is put the best foot forward and let compounding do its thing.
And on that note, I'd also like to share that reason why I gave that book to you as an inner colleague. And fun fact, I only bought that book on the flight a couple of days ago. So that says miles and miles and some things. Krish, it was an absolute honor. For me, a conversation with you is just as refreshing, and I feel like no time has passed by. And I know that there's a lot of value in this episode, especially for me, if I was a listener and as the host. But I truly hope that there is something, an action, a thought, a tool that someone listening takes from this today. And hopefully we get to hear about it. Krish, thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you very, very much, Amani. This was a pleasure.
Great. And then that's a wrap. We'll see you all on the next episode.